Here we are.
Yay, we did it.
Recording. This time I was panicking.
For anybody who's wondering why we're late, Mercury retrograde is starting this week, and we wanted to make sure we had all of our details in a row because it is happening in Virgo. So critical thinking. Yay. Hi, welcome to the Ask Me Astros monthly live broadcast. This is where we jump in and Vivi, Henriette, and I'm KristaLyn. We will jump in and actually read an anonymous chart, go into showing you what it looks like when two astrologers with different ways of thinking go at a chart with the same question and show you all the different ways that astrologers can approach questions and reading of charts. So this is going to be really exciting. We're also going to tie in some of the current events that are going on, Virgo season, Mercury retrograde. It's a busy week. So here we go. Vivi, how you doing?
I'm great. And I'm going to add to this Mercury retrograde business. I am one of the reasons we are late because yesterday, as Mercury has officially slowed down to the degree which it will retrograde, or rather on Saturday, my computer broke. So I did the thing you're not supposed to do in Mercury's in shadow, which is buy a new computer. So which always seems to happen. Like last retrograde, I was buying a new phone. So God bless, and I wish everyone the games have begun. Mercury retrograde.
Agreed. This is happening through my midheaven, and I have to go back a couple years because something about the energy of this reminded me of a couple years ago when right around Mercury retrograde, my phone just flatly fell on the ground and shattered its screen like 2 days before I was going to replace it. And this week, this is a whole new case, a whole new pop socket, a whole new screen protector, because my previous case was not enough to protect my screen. The screen protector was, but it is fully shattered. So I'm feeling you on the whole technology thing. I actually posted to Threads yesterday, like, make sure you do your travel planning, which I was doing over the weekend for our upcoming trip to Palm Springs. That's why. So do your travel plans, check your technology, make sure it's all up to date, or at least that you have insurance on it if you are someone who, like me, is accident prone. And check where Virgo is in your chart, because that's where Mercury is for the majority of this retrograde. I think the whole retrograde, right?
Yeah, and the nice thing is I believe it'll station direct in Virgo. So we do get a nice Mercury direct in Virgo for those who are looking for interesting elections.
Yeah.
That's positive.
Well, and Mars will move on, because the first segment of Mercury and Virgo being direct had Mars right there. I was trying to do something with a group. We would travel to Ireland, and we ended up doing a petition to Mercury, just saying we're going to be ambitious writers, because how do you really incorporate the fact that Mars is there? You can't make him go away. So now Mars will hopefully move away a little bit.
Mars, and can I just point this out? It was funny. I was having dinner with our friend Gabe Rosas a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, something like this. And he's like, yeah, Mercury, like almost the whole time before going retrograde, not only like with Mars, but sandwiched between a Mars-Saturn sandwich. Like this has felt like with Venus retrograde too. I feel like it's felt like we've been in a really weird, angry, like, because you don't want to piss Mercury off, right? I feel like the trickster pissed off is just kind of like what this has been like a month of.
Yeah, it's definitely chaotic. And I'm interested to see how it's going to show up with the tail end of Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde. So we're going to have those two personal planets, the closest, both retrograde at the same time. I've been telling people, have a great sense of humor in your communications of your relationships right now, because that, or bring a lot of icebreakers, whatever's necessary, because it might get a little bit awkward in the communication. You want to make sure you're very clear with each other.
You know, this was a very necessary PSA, because as much as even I know these things, I could feel like it coming up in my own life of just being kind of like angry. You know, I may or may not have had a little bit of a breakdown in the Apple store because nothing was coming.
Nothing works. Yeah. Been there.
So, and on to the show. Speaking of Virgo, we are entering Virgo season. We have a Virgo heavy chart. We are talking health today. Shall I bring up the presentation as you maybe give the intro to today's chart?
Yeah. So this chart is of a person who, as we will see in just a moment, has Sagittarius rising with Venus right on the ascendant. And those are very important things. You might even look at Jupiter and say, oh, the ruler of the chart. And you could, because that's going to segue you into the 10th house of this chart, where Jupiter is conjunct the North Node, as well as the moon conjunct Saturn, all in Virgo. So this is, again, a lot of roads pointing back to Virgo in this case, even though the question from today is going to be health. Normally you would immediately just say, ooh, health, sixth house. But there's so much more that goes into the question of health, or the translation of health in a chart. And we're really, thanks to this question and this person's chart, going to be able to dive into several ways of looking at it today. So we're going to get a big holistic experience of how to observe health in someone's chart, even including timing techniques. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And well, let's say we'll read the question. I will read the question, and then let's maybe even spend some time talking about our approaches for study of this one, because I think it's fun. We both kind of bring two different angles. So this person's asking, what does my chart say about health and goals for the next bit of time? And for those watching on YouTube, which I don't know, you might have left the room, but this is a video. I'm gonna pull up the chart, and maybe let's just, before we even dig into the chart, KristaLyn, tell me a little bit about, like, when someone comes in as a client and has a health question, how do you approach that? And tell me a little bit about how you approach this.
So my first thoughts with this was, it's a health question. I want to look at the condition of their sixth house, and I really wanted to look at the moon.
Yeah.
Since the moon does rule the body. There was a case in my mind where it's like, I always check the ascendant first anyway, just to see what their kind of anchor is in their life. But I was very much drawn towards sixth house stuff and the moon with this. And then, of course, because so much goes back to Virgo, I kind of hung out there for a while. But there's a lot of conjunctions in this chart that really held my fancy.
Yes. All of that. And so I'm like, all of that. This was a really interesting one for me personally, because when it comes to health stuff, I'm generally one of the, as an astrologer, I am not a medical astrologer. I storytell, I'll talk to you about the future. But when it comes to health stuff, I can, note what might be difficult times, but I'm generally like, okay, go see a health practitioner. Especially like tarot, people will be like, tell me about my health. And I'm like, go to a doctor or someone who a healthcare professional. So when I did this chart, I had just, my podcast, Talk, had interviewed a friend of mine, Danielle Ashley, who is a medical astrologer, also has years working as a trained acupuncturist and practitioner of classical Chinese medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. So I actually had a consultation with her to talk about health and get some of her viewpoints. So I want to say, like, full disclosure, a lot of what I'm bringing to the table today was informed by my conversation with Danielle, who I would just kind of say, like, if this person was my client, we'll investigate what we investigate today, but I might say, for many reasons, and I'll bring this up, like, you might want to also see someone who is specifically trained, because, man, medical astrology is a whole different ball of wax. I don't know if I've never studied it specifically. I don't know about you.
I have a little bit. I'm my first anything in this whole realm was, I'm an energy healer. I worked on healing because of my own health issues. So healing and working with medical astrology, even though it's not my expertise, it is in my awareness. But I'm very excited to hear about what the person you interviewed said, because it sounds like they do specialize in it. And I highly respect people who are deep in their studies. There's something to be said about experience. So yeah, I'm again really excited to hear how that goes. And again, I love that we're starting with the natal promise, because when you look at a chart, you are seeing in Hellenistic astrology, they were very much of the mind of, like, how long does this person have and what is the quality of their physical existence? And so a lot of the time, your career and things came up, but their primary, like, zodiacal releasing and things did come from fortune, unless your career was more of the nature of spirit. Valens gets into that, I believe, in book 4. But you want to look at the lot of fortune for things that are fortune related. And they had this whole thing about how your chart could be said to actually be beginning at your lot of fortune. You can turn it so that fortune is on the ascendant and get a whole read of your fortune in life, which is how your body gets to experience living in the world. So I think that it's very important to remember that we can see stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean that we are capable of diagnosing the specific stuff. And it doesn't mean that we can heal the stuff, especially with just astrology. So yes, we can give you peace of mind We can give you some strategies and things to help you feel more in control of the situation that may not feel in control, especially if you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And being someone who's worked with several people who were working with medical professionals, but then I was supplementary to their treatment, you end up learning very quickly if you are an astrologer and you're looking at getting into this, or if you're someone who's looking to visit an astrologer, understand that an astrologer is an astrologer, or even understand that a healer is a healer in their modality. And I will say, in my practices with people, in cooperation with medical intervention,
Yeah.
we did see a cancer patient who only had 3 months left actually go into remission in 2. So it does help. It was one of the most amazing stories that I've ever been able to witness in my life, and I was so blessed to be a part of it. That being said, I never once would have said, hey, don't go to a doctor, because if I would have just done that myself, I'd actually not be here. Medical intervention is what kept me alive. And then the preventative measures that I use in astrology, the preventative measures that I use with my own energy healing, help me have quality of life and prevent other issues. But like they say, there's this Netflix documentary. I forget what it's called, but they say, like, if you have a broken arm, go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
If you want to prevent a broken arm, do all the things that you can do to have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, to build on that, I recently, which was just perfect timing for me because I had a consultation with Danielle myself for my personal medical stuff. Medical is such a big word. But what I've noticed, the role of astrology, even like medical astrology, right? Like talking to someone who has the medical background, is really, like you said, preventative. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like, it's interesting because, like, I too have had people in my life who've had some terrible illnesses, and I'm not saying that astrology could have prevented them, right, or even healed them. But I've noticed, right, doctors in the Western medicine, as my friend Julie Mihas we just had a talk earlier this week, was saying, it's not really good at preventative. You can go into your doctor for years and, like, they'll be like, oh, your vitals look fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine until you're not fine. And then we have an issue. But what I think the benefit of really plugging in, like, the astrology of health, we could say, is to be an advocate for your own healing, right? So for me, when I was looking at the chart, I was like, oh, there's some possibility for, like, inflammation here, or whatever it was. And it's like, maybe I can be proactive by watching these things, by eating a certain way, right? So that when I do go to my doctor, I can be like, hey, I'm kind of concerned about this, and I know to ask my doctor the right questions. So I think that that's just the biggest benefit of this, is being in control of your health, because oftentimes most people, we don't really have a culture that supports that unless you're willing to do the work.
Yeah, especially not in the Western world.
Yes.
On this end. I was talking to someone in Ireland, and they said something about how everybody in Europe smokes and curses, but everybody in America drives and eats crap food. It's like, ouch, but you're not wrong. Or they say walks and smokes. That's what it was. Everyone in Europe walks and smokes, and everybody in the America or the Western hemisphere drives and eats crap food. And I was just thinking, that is such an impression for them to have of us, that I'm not seeing us break the stereotype of in a general capacity. And even, working with my own family, I looked ahead at one point and said, hey, are you keeping up to date on your doctor's appointments? I have concerns about this and this and this. And of course they said yes. They weren't entirely forthcoming with me on that case. And when something did happen, it was of the nature. So again, it really is in your power to take care of your own health. And the knowledge that you have is something that astrology can help with. The team that you have is whatever you make of it. And that should include healthcare professionals and whatever else you feel comfortable with.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Like, healthcare, it was so amazing to have someone like, an astrologer, but also I think like a medical astrologer who has a medical background. I think that's really important. I'm just singing Danielle's praises because I love her so much, but she has her whole life, she has studied the body, right? Like, when you're go through acupuncture school, it's like, it's a bachelor's and depending on master's, depending on, I know she has a master's in nutrition. So this is someone who's like literally studied the body. So I love that she's a, and there's plenty of people like her, which I love. There's plenty of people out there who are great astrologers and have also studied the body. So they can be your first, I want to say, they kind of understand the medical language. So they make great advocates.
Yeah.
Um, Shall we jump into the chart? Tell me, like, we talked a little bit about what you look at the natal promise, but if you want to share that, and then I'll kind of bounce off.
Yeah. So when I looked at the natal promise, I was looking at the fact that even if you look at what's not obvious on the chart,
Yeah.
prenatal eclipse for this person, which really
Okay.
punctuates some themes that may be prominent in a person's life,
Yeah.
was also in Virgo. So as their North Node shows, it was a solar eclipse in Virgo that really was their prenatal eclipse. They have the Virgo as the 10th house. The Moon Saturn conjunction there shows that the body is always going to be, to me, this is like really focused. It's probably something they are focused on a lot because they've had to maintain it. They've had to cooperate with their body in a lot of ways. They say later in their question, in the bigger part of it, that they are working on their nutrition and being on a plant-based diet. So they're really working on that communication and understanding between them and their physical body.
Yeah.
Which again shows up for me very much with that Virgo moon, but also Saturn there as not the out of sect malefic, but still as a point of restriction and a point of authority in the chart. And then, of course, Jupiter North Node and the Jupiter Mercury relationship here, which is always really cool to see. Jupiter and Mercury are in square to each other. Mercury rules the 10th house and is retrograde, but also they have mutual reception, even though they're both detriment.
That's really nice to think about. God, I mean, I think the Saturn moon, and this isn't something, if you think about the moon as the body, I always think Saturn moon can be harsh. I mean, maybe medical issues perhaps, but it also just feels like exhaustion, right? The moon, because there's a lot in this chart too to pick up from there that I think really speaks to a mind-body connection, both in the natal in the natal promise, and then with some of the transits as well. Something, and again, if I had this consultation with Ashley and it was amazing, and she just was starting to talk about the liver, and I was like, no way am I getting into that level of specifics. This is like beyond me. So I'm going to try to do her justice from one of the things she shared with me. But one thing she said is you want to look at the difference, the way she explained it to me, between the first house and the sixth, is the sixth represents the illness, and the first house, you want to look to the ruler of the rising sign to see the person's vitality. And so it's interesting, as you pointed out, all of that Virgo stuff, that the ruler of the rising sign, right, representing the person's vitality, is also in Virgo, as you mentioned, in detriment, right? Not fall. It took me a minute there. In detriment. And so maybe there's some, we could see maybe some struggles here, right? Interesting. I would wonder with that Mercury and Jupiter, like the mutual reception of that, like also Mercury, even though it's doesn't really like to be in Sagittarius, it is in its joy in the first house. And I think it makes me think of someone who's like, okay, like maybe it's Virgo, being really broad speaking. Maybe there's some digestive issues here. Maybe there's some chronic stuff, right? But there's that, like, the sort of maybe like I am making this a 10th house subject. I'm going to put my like life's energy and work into this. And then the last part, just to sort of finish, I'll let you take off, is that thinking about, so the ruler of the rising, in this case being Jupiter, but then also thinking about the ruler of the sixth house being Venus in the first. So there is this sort of twinedness with person and illness that we get testifying in a few different spots here.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're absolutely right. Another thing that comes to mind with the Mercury situation, but also if you bring it into a little bit more modern, I have this really weird relationship with Chiron. So I would give it more weight than I normally would to other things. Chiron is, of course, in the sixth house as well. And with Chiron being the wounded healer, Mercury, of course, saying, let's take this and make it a message. It's the make your mess your message kind of indicator, which is emphasized. And I think if Chiron agrees with something, especially that is notable. So Chiron on its own is doing a thing, but since it's already emphasizing something else we're seeing in the chart, I think it really punctuates it, that this is someone who has had to do the work, but maybe they've kept the Jupiter upbeat, I'm still chugging along idealism that they might have, especially with Jupiter conjunct the North Node. They almost probably can't even avoid their own positivity in some ways. And there would be some days that I would say, hey, lean into the Saturn and rest a little bit.
Yeah.
But knowing that, it's like they're saying, I had to go through this. I might as well make it worth something. Let me help other people with it. In the Jupiter really expanding on the service energies of Virgo.
I am. Okay. Can you?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm dealing with a mic issue. I apologize. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. You've been good this whole time.
Okay, cool. Because I keep getting something saying my mic's unplugged. So I apologize, everyone, if that happens again. Ooh, so I figure out what's going on here. Give me just a moment. I apologize for this.
No worries. So while you're looking at that, one of the things that I do want to point out as Vivi is setting up the technology is if we actually look into different indicators of health, I wanted to see like what is the list? It's an exhaustive list. And when I look just even in the index of Demetra George's Ancient Astrology book, if you look under health in that, you have health and illness, which then goes into the ascendant lord, domicile lord of the lot of fortune, 8th house, 11th house, 1st house, lot of fortune, moon, 6th house, 12th house. And then you could also see life force, medical astrology, and melothesia. But just thinking about all of those things that we look at when we're really narrowing down the topic of health in the chart, you end up getting into, well, what kind of health are we thinking about? But at the same time, there are a lot of indicators that show us how our condition is. Truly, it is a wheel of fortune when you're looking at an astrology chart, even though, to be fair, astrology charts weren't always circular.
Yes. Hello, Mercury retrograde. I think we figured it out. Oh, Lord. One of the things I'm curious, the biggest thing that came from me, and if this was my client, I would probably say, let's talk about the story. Let's figure out where you are. Let's figure out maybe your story around health, because that's what I do. And then let me pass you on to someone who can get like into the nitty gritty of like, maybe talking about blood sugar and all of these other things that are beyond my scope, right? But something that does stick out really loudly to me, right? I love what you just said about make your mess your message. That does speak really loudly here. And I think what also testifies to that is, we have that Mars in the 9th, right? Which is being highlighted right now in various ways. But that Mars rules the sun in the 12th. Right. And we think of the sun in the 12th can lack vitality. And again, when I mentioned this to Danielle, it's not necessarily like physical vitality, because if we think about the 12th house, it's matters of the mind, right? That sort of it's more has a mental quality to it. And I'm wondering if this person has, struggled with depression or isolation, as suns in the 12th do. Sometimes there's a confidence issue. And so it's also interesting because it's the only like water in this chart, and it's fixed water. And it is getting that overcoming square from Mars, which rules it. And so there is something there too. Like the 9th house is like the house of publishing, but also philosophy and my view on the world. And so I'm wondering what this person's going through now isn't just like their physical health, but also kind of like the physical health is a way to deal with the mind, right? That mind-body connection.
Well, and it's, as you pointed out, not only is it that Mars is in the overcoming square, we have mutual reception again. Mars is also in his own terms. So Mars, even though Mars, to note, is not the triplicity ruler of fire. I know that feels counterintuitive, but Mars is a nocturnal planet, so we give him over to water. So to the triplicity ruler of the sun, I don't know if by day. I think by day. But anyway.
Oh, wait, triplicity of fire?
Triplicity of water by day.
No, isn't it by night, because it's a night planet?
Yeah. Well, no, because there's a day and a night triplicity ruler. So the night planets are the triplicity rulers of the feminine element triplicities, or the feminine triplicities. But I can't remember who is. I
think Mars has triplicity water at night, because that always was interesting to me, because Mars in Cancer has triplicity at night. But also Mars in Cancer is really difficult. I think I'm right.
About it. Because I know Chris Brennan has that handy graphic of the different triplicity rulers.
Love the handy. Thank you, Chris Brennan, for creating these graphics.
And of course, I'm not really finding it. Let me just do triplicity.
God, this person's chart is like heavy on the mutual reception, which is something.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Day ruler of It's Venus. Venus would be the day ruler of the water triplicity. Mars is the night. So Mars is night. So you're absolutely correct. So Venus again would be the triplicity ruler of the sun in this case. And if you went into triplicity like delineation, that's a whole other thing. Because the sun is the sect light. But again, looking at Mars in his own terms as the overcoming square to the sun and as mutual reception with the sun, there's a lot of dialogue there. And again, to really bring in some possibility, especially with the sun really conjunct, like very conjunct Uranus in the 12th house.
To the degree, for those of you who have bad eyes like me.
Yeah, it's at 21 degrees Scorpio. They are both there. So they're partile is what we call that, partile conjunct. Yeah. And so this is the beginning of a whole new cycle for Uranus in the world at the time that this person was born, but also this person is kind of hallmarked with that. So there might be some eccentricity in the way that they think, especially in the 12th house. It may not be the way that they think at the forefront. It may be what happens sort of in their subconscious. So psychology may relate a lot. We know that our nerves are related to the stomach and other parts of our body. So again, like you were saying, the symptom may be physical expression. The source might be more of a psychological or a subconscious thing. So when we're looking at healthcare here, we want to also do the holistic expression of it and say mind and body and spirit are all important at this point.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Kind of building on that we know that like Virgo energy in general has a bit of anxiety to it, right? There is that, like, I want to find a better word, but I think that's like intrinsically Virgo. There is the trying to make everything okay, trying to like, and I think oftentimes that manifests as a mental, it's ruled by Mercury, right? That can also manifest as a mental energy. So we get that with the Sun Uranus in the 12th. Also thinking, I'd love to know this person's background, right? Like when someone says, I'm going to do a plant-based diet, like, what was it like growing up? Because I think that Mars and Leo in the 9th, I wonder if there was maybe some religious or cultural influence, like if there was a lot of like heavy-handedness, this is how we do things. And part of what this person's experiencing now with this calling for a new diet and detox is kind of a breakaway from a whole type of life that they've been living.
I actually love that. I had a consultation with Eric Perdue yesterday, and we were talking a lot about my Mars, but he mentioned Mars in general as the heretic. The Mars in the 9th house, more so. And heretic doesn't mean like, oh my God, you're sacrilegious. It's like I'm going against the grain of what I was told to do, kind of rebelling against the establishment in that sense. So are you doing it because you have? I can't remember. I have Mars in the 5th, but Mars is my almatim figuris and the lord of my chart, and in a trine with Jupiter and the moon, and rules the moon. So like Mars is loud for me, which came up in the conversation. But thinking about Mars in that sense, just saying like I can now because I can, and nobody else is telling me about it. Like this might be a person whose family is like, why aren't you eating beef? And it's like, because you don't have to. Yeah.
It's funny. I had also had a consultation with Eric Perdue, which this is maybe our informal commercial for everyone. If you're interested,
we're not sponsored by Eric Perdue. We're just admiring.
We are admiring Eric Perdue. The man who just translated the, Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, which is like, weighs as much as small babies. And you can also get a reading with him. But yeah, I have Mars in the 9th. So I heard the heretic speech too. But right, it's interesting that there's that Mars in the 9th, but also feeling like that Sun in the 12th here is that maybe this is a person who's struggled with having the confidence to come out and maybe, speak their truth confidently. And so we think about, there's so much here between the mind and body that I can't help but wonder. Well, this person also mentioned they're a writer and they're writing a book, which makes sense. And thinking about just the symbolism of what the health stuff means for the mental journey of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And as to the, they said it was like during a new moon. When I checked the date, that new moon was the new moon in their perfected house of Cancer from the ascendant. So they had all these ideas come in when their Time Lord for the year from the ascendant, the moon, had its conjunction with the sun in their perfected house, which is pretty cool. So if you're thinking, was that idea a cool one? Should I pursue it? Probably. It came to you at a really opportune time. So just keeping that in mind as well.
Did I do what? I had that they're in it. Oh, did I mess up the years? What profession are they in? For some reason, I thought Mars, but I could be wrong here. But you're probably right.
Let me double check.
Double check.
Because I use, I've got the 8th house according to AstroSeek.
You're probably right. I probably miscalculated. You are right. Right. That's interesting because the solar return, then that becomes the first house.
Yeah. Yeah, their solar return. I have my notes here. Perfected 8th house Cancer. The midheaven is in their natal 4th house of Pisces. They're in a disseminating phase, so they're really processing and putting out information that they've learned this year, which is cool. And again, that solar return was in the 8th house of Cancer as well. The moon was in the Cancer at the time. Good Lord. Yeah. So, I mean, I could pull up the chart as well, but that 8th house is really active this year.
By the way, I have the solar return chart up here too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's right. The 8th house, of course, is the idol house, and it is the house of like transitions and things as well. So the fact that this person is kind of giving themselves body related goals that they are working with, and maybe even turning inward a little bit and focusing on their own nourishment, is very astute of them to be picking up on. I think that's really cool. You can even see the solar return ascendant is there too. It's a big focus for them this year.
Yeah. And, the other thing I was thinking about additionally is that this person was born, I believe, in November. I can't see. No. Yeah, we're Virgo season, but they were born in November. Am I correct there? November.
Yeah, they're Scorpio. So.
Yeah.
Let me look at my data here.
That's November, not Mercury. That's my brain. So they've been living with this solar return for a while. They're about to have a new one, which is to say, if the moon was their profected ruler, they would have probably felt these eclipses more. And the eclipses have just moved into the Aries Libra axis, but they've been having eclipses for the last 18 months or what have you, in the Scorpio Taurus axis, which has been highlighting their 12th house of their sun. South node in their sun can lack some vitality. 6th house of illness, but routine. So I imagine that whatever conversation we're having now is coming on the heels of maybe some bigger story that was really brought out by those eclipses.
Yeah, agreed.
You were so one of the things I know we brought up the solar return chart, we could talk about in a moment, but one of the things that thinking about Danielle pointed out was that first house, which is, we haven't talked a lot about, but it's Sagittarius, so it's Jupiter ruled. And there's, Venus there, right? Who's also the 6th house ruler. And wondering, right, Venus really likes the good things in life. I mean, Mercury's there too. And I'm wondering if this person kind of struggles with overindulgence. And I say this because there's might be something really comforting around food, or we could say food, right? Like bodily, or what you put into yourself. And I'm wondering if there's that disconnect. Sometimes I've noticed a lot of times we approach diet and we approach eating like it's just habits, do this, don't do that. But often there's emotional story that we have to really get to before we can get to those blocks, before we can see results in the physical world. And seeing that 12th house sun in contrast to that, those planets in the first, makes me think, I'm wondering if this person kind of deals with the mental issues through this sort of physical block. And that's something I might want to explore with them. I'm not sure if I want to put that delicately.
No, and as someone who's kind of lived a similar story to that, I think you've put that really well. Sometimes we express or process or give tangible form to our feelings and what we can do to and with our body, and that includes what we can eat, how it makes us feel safe. I remember just even developing an intuitive ability. Every reading I had for the longest time, they said, be careful what you eat, because you're going to try to ground yourself with food. So that's another way to put it, is if you have a lot of feelings, looking at that Venus being fire, mutable, angular, that's not Venus's normal environment. And when you put Venus in that environment, it's like a shopping spree, forgetting about the credit limit.
Yeah.
So there might be this inclination of, I just really want to have fun. I want to be able to do all the things I want to do, but there's this almost voice that you can't quite hear that just feels foreboding of that sun in Scorpio being like, mm-mm, and Venus either listening or not listening, depending on the day.
Yeah, depending on the day. And I
Mhm.
think that's why like the 12th house sometimes for the sun is hard. It's like the dark night of the soul, because there is that sense to like you can get lost in a lot of things. I think it's easy to like get lost in your indulgences. I'm not saying this person is, but I would definitely want to
Mhm.
open that conversation to ask about, as we said, what is their history to food? Where did this come from?
Mhm.
And what's the bigger story narrative that they're in to kind of situate their health story?
Well, and another thing I would ask them is, what
Yeah.
do you find yourself telling other people very often? Like,
Oh,
what's the message you end up giving other people? Because we've got that Virgo in the 10th with so much there. And so what we end up saying to others, I find this, as people who do consultations, we often end up finding people who have messages for us and we end up telling them the message that we also have to listen to.
yeah.
This looks like a classic case of, what do you find yourself saying to other people and how can you hear what you're saying? My dad, when he used to read my books, would be like, were you listening to yourself when you read this or when you wrote this? And I was like, no, I don't even remember what it says. Then you read it back and you're like, oh, that was for me. So it would help maybe not even just to like really analyze. I don't want to encourage this person to analyze too deeply with that Virgo moon.
Yeah.
Go into it and just say, gut instinct. Let's tap into the Virgo in a different way.
Yeah.
Gut instinct. What is the thing you find yourself telling people often, and how does that advice also support you? And it's usually that simple.
Ooh, I think when I was thinking about this person, a couple of things this brings up for me, but specifically, and again, I have a friend, I've just had a few friends recently that are older and they've had like some, ongoing health stuff, but they've never really, like, I've known that they've never known how to take care of themselves and they've never had support in that way, which is something that we take for granted, right? Like
Mhm,
something to think about too. Um, what's your support system? Like,
mhm. Yeah.
if you want to get healthy, are you around people who can help that, right? Do you
Mhm,
have an advocate? But again, really kind of emphasizing that, how we take care of ourselves is really like a social issue, right? It's an emotional issue. But I love the writing part. Like this person might find that maybe doing something like morning pages or a writing dump or really being conscious about journaling. Like, how do
mhm.
I feel after I did this? What do I eat? How does it make me feel? Like that could be really important for this person, a really useful tool.
Mhm. Another thing that comes to mind is, it seems like we're working with the body in a way of control as a form of support,
Mm,
controlling what we're eating, controlling all the things. But that Venus in that first house is saying, let's move. So both of these areas are mutable. Saturn and the moon are trying to support in the form of structure
yeah.
and routine and things. And that's helpful. I'm not saying disregard it because Jupiter is also there saying, yeah, cool. But in that, there's also the like, outside of food, can we have activity? Can we get maybe athletic or yoga or, some kind of more? I'm trying to think of like, what's an athletic thing that Virgo might like, or something Sagittarian with a Virgo kind of slant to it. Just letting Venus feel expressive. And again, Virgo, right? Writing, I almost want to say comedy or poetry would be really cool for this person to really just let out and decompress a lot of stuff, because there is the propensity in a lot of people with Virgo placements to hold on to things very tightly
Yeah.
because it's a sense of control. It keeps things together, but then you forget. And I have a prominent Virgo as well, so I'm relating here.
Yeah.
Um, you forget to loosen the grip every once in a while, and you get so tight that you get stuck there. Like when your mom would say your face is going to get stuck like that. It's not your face, it's your habits. So maybe think about how changing up your routine seasonally, now that we're going into Virgo season with Mercury going retrograde through that 10th house,
Mhm.
having the ability to change things up. And since it's in your 10th house, you can do it for other people, which is going to probably motivate you to do it a little bit more and make it more fun and more motivating again, to make that seem like it's something you really do want to do.
I like pointing out that the really interesting contrast between, right? We think about Sagittarius is the land of fun, right? But it's also ruled by Jupiter in the land of Virgo, which is like really good at delayed gratification. So there is that sort of conversation of maybe that's the kind of like I would wonder if this person has like seesaw habits, like a lot of fun, then I'm making up for it. Or trying to like, speaking to that rigidity too, something I think, again, another reason if this person's undergoing, like deciding they want to take on a plant-based diet, if that's not where they've been in life, another benefit of maybe finding a medical astrologer or a health professional, that could be like an Ayurvedic practitioner, Chinese medicine practitioner, would be for them to also find a diet that actually fits their body type. Right. Just some things that came up. It's like, oh man, the Venus and the first could be like blood sugar issues. So maybe if this person goes on a plant-based diet and they're eating a bunch of fruits, that might not be good for their system, but also are they getting enough like iron, protein, etc. Right. Things that are not in my wheelhouse, but they're definitely things that I would want to like, I think it's really important to state that diets are not one size fits all. So I'd really encourage this person to kind of go deeper and find something that's going to fit their unique needs.
Yeah. As someone who is primarily plant-based as well, one of the things I see people get wrapped up in, and this is not to this person individually, although with Virgo, grain might be a thing. Your blood sugar, especially in America, will spike so much from the breads that we have here because there's so much sugar and salt in them. When you go over to Europe, they say that our bread tastes like cake. And when you go over there, it tastes so much, it's different. And I like it more because I'm like sensitive to sugar now that I've kind of put it out of my diet.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're doing whole grains and ones that are not, there's like fast carbs and then there's slow carbs. Slow carbs is going to help you maintain your energy for a long period of time. Fast carbs will spike that blood sugar. Also working with a lot of family members who have diabetes, blood sugar management is something I've been focused on for them and to prevent for myself. Yes, you will have a dip immediately after having a high fast carb situation like a bagel or whatever, but it's because it's going to spike. So it is sort of like a tsunami where it pulls out first and then it crashes in. So that's something to be aware of. If even on a plant-based diet, I know grains are plants, but you got to pick the ones that are going to work for you. Kind of like what you were saying with fruit.
Yeah. And whatever protein sources, it's interesting because when I had my consultation, I'm someone who eats fairly healthy, right? I think I do all the things. I don't do like processed foods.
Yeah, I love eating out with you because we always get along really well.
Oh, totally. But then I think there's like a nuance that someone like an Ayurvedic practitioner or a Chinese medical practitioner can provide, or maybe whatever nutritionist and whatever modality is that like. Yeah, maybe like, for instance, like cold foods aren't really good with my constitution. So even though salads are fantastic, there's nothing wrong with them. I can't do a lot of cold foods. So I don't want to like make assessments on this person's chart because like, that's not my wheelhouse. But something to think about is that what you said is very valuable information, but also to go deeper is to understand that like, there are some things because, it's interesting as Danielle pointed out, there's a lot of dryness in this chart. But you don't want to like, you want to kind of maintain the dryness, but then you don't want to overdo it. And so when we start to think about food and lifestyle, these are issues we want to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, totally. Cause I like, even in my household, I'm a Pitta dosha. Yeah. My husband's a Kapha. So for him, the grains that are more long or slow carbs actually help his metabolism have something to do for a longer period of time. Mine is like, okay, we're done. What's next? And that can be like a blessing and a curse in its own right. Yeah. But for him, it's like, I need something that's going to sustain me throughout rather than doing the spikes like I do it. So totally supporting what you're saying here. Yeah.
And that's a good point because you both live in the same household. You're both eating a lot of the same foods, but you do
have our own cabinets.
But you have those differences based on your personal body needs.
Yeah. He'll have a rice base. I'll have a cauliflower rice base. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. We didn't talk a lot about the solar return. Do you want to like pop in there for a moment?
Yeah. Let me just pull it up on my, my situation over here too, so I can look at it the way my eyes are used to.
Oh God,
you get it.
Oh, I do. I'm like staring at this tiny chart. I'm about to get like real in the screen. Sorry, everyone.
All right, so looking at the bi-wheel of the charts, yeah. So the solar return, like we kind of touched on earlier, is still very focused on that 8th house, which is Cancer. And yes, we have in November this will transition over. So for this person in November, you'll be looking less lunar, more solar. But until then, we're still looking at the moon, paying attention to lunar cycles. The fact that a new moon was very noticeable for you, especially when it was in Cancer, makes tons of sense, right? So those lunar cycles, even adjusting and experimenting with how your body feels when the moon is in different phases or different signs. Another health astrologer, the one from Norwalk.
There's a few.
Kira Sutherland.
Kira Sutherland. Oh yeah,
Kira Sutherland made the point of like observing the moon and your own body cycles, whether that's menstruation or something else. Just observing what sign is the moon in and how do you feel, and then you can sort of track that consistency, and you'll be able to feel a little bit more viscerally this year because the moon is kind of guiding you through the year and getting you in tune with your body a little bit more. So there's still time to do that.
You know, that's it. This really brings up something for me. Thinking about in the solar return chart, the moon is in Cancer, which is almost inviting that, which feels very different than the natal story, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the natal promise, we get the moon in Virgo with Saturn, which feels very much to me like someone who can live in their head. And even though it's an earth sign, it's this like maybe the emotions show up in the gut, but there might be like a disconnect from actually feeling and getting into your body. And, you know, we kind of, that Sagittarius rising can be a little like disembodied too, in a sense, right? There could be a like an energetic there. So for this one, you working with the moon and actually having to slow down and ask themselves, how do I feel physically, mentally, could be a really important way to work with the moon and actually bring in something to their life that maybe their chart doesn't naturally do.
Yeah. And it makes me think of like the Virgo moon is, what are the rules as society says they are? Like, how can I follow the perfect diet? And then this year it's okay. What I know the general rules of nutrition. What are my rules of nutrition? What works for me? And making it even more personal with that.
Yeah. And again, this could be another reason for maybe getting supports, right? I'm all about everyone should have a team of people, right? So to really kind of like sometimes supports, like I think that's the beauty of like this of astrology is to kind of feel in the part, you know, feel into your blind spots.
Yeah. Eric Purdue actually said water is really good at filling in the gaps. And I thought that's a great way of saying that.
Ooh, build on that for me.
So we were looking at my water and trine, and he was saying that, you know, you fill in the gaps. So you go in the spaces that aren't filled till you make something that is piecey feel whole. So this is a great time to be allowing yourself to fill in the gaps and finding the resources that fill in the gaps, finding the people at the right time, finding the opportunities at the right time, learning new things to add to what you know, but fill in the gaps of what you don't. So it's something that might, for someone who, again, as you pointed out, their only water is in the inaccessible 12th house and is fixed. Now they're getting into the more like tapping into their intuition, getting in touch with their feelings and their emotions, and filling in the gaps of what they've already mastered. Now they can fill in the gaps.
I love that. You know, it's something so small here, but I might even ask this person what their relationship to water is, right? If they tend to run dry, right? And like, again, as Danielle pointed out, you don't want to give this person too much water because their constitution does run dry. But I'd be curious to know, like, even thinking about like the metaphor of water, like you said, but also physical water. Like, could this person benefit from like baths or sauna or just like the cooling effects of being around water? Maybe there is that, like, you know, spending time with water tends to like put our emotions at ease.
Yeah. Listen to the waves, or even listen to a recording of the waves and see how that helps you feel if you don't have access to the waves more close to you. Or just like looking at a bird bath in someone's yard or in your own yard, instead of having to drive all the way to an ocean.
You know, I love this is like our like astrological remediation is get a bird, like feed the birds.
Pop in the bag. Yeah.
Well, Mercury is birds, right? Mercury in the first. I feel like there's something there that I haven't quite fleshed out, but I think this is actually brilliant.
Yeah. That Mercury-Jupiter relationship is not something to be overlooked. It's definitely something worth exploring, which of course Mercury would love to do where it is. And you have a Mercury retrograde coming up this Wednesday, which will be the 22nd through, I think it's like the very middle of September. It's like the 14th of September is that Mercury retrograde. So for the person whose chart this is, and we'll let you know who you are.
Can we just say out loud that it feels extra foreboding when Mercury stations retrograde on their day.
Yeah. Well, on the day that the sun also comes into Virgo and they're trine Uranus the same day. I'm looking at that day and I'm just like, And I was going to say earthquakes, but we already had one of those in LA yesterday at the same time as a hurricane. So Uranus and Taurus with Jupiter, I think, is not messing around when it comes to nature, kind of reclaiming its authority in the world.
And for more brilliant insights, follow KristaLyn on Threads and all the places, because this is an ongoing conversation.
Sorry.
No, I love it. Like, I mean, I don't love it, but I'm also like, you mentioned you put a post out the other day and we're like, hide your electronics, or like, here's some tips. And I'm saying hide your electronics.
Yeah.
But...
yeah. I like Threads because I don't like, when I'm not talking with someone, I feel awkward putting my face on stuff, and I don't take pictures that much. Libra's in my 12th, y'all. No artistic ability over here. So I just say stuff with words, and Threads facilitates that really well. So I end up posting random thoughts there, which is really fun.
It's great. I have to get back on. I just had a moment of like too much, but as we wrap this up, I want to give a shout out. But for that, any final thoughts?
To this person, we're going to reach out to you. We're going to give you coupons for a free reading with both of us on our individually. To anybody else who's watching, you can use the code VirgoAMA, all one word, on either of our websites to get 10% off of a consultation with us as well. That's the benefit of watching this every month. So definitely feel free to submit your questions for next month, because you could get a free reading. But regardless, you're going to get 10% off, which is always nice.
Yay. And then I'm going to do, if I can move my slide. Okay, so I'm going to give a special shout out to Queen of Hearts, Danielle Ashley. Follow her on her website, sign up for a newsletter, Instagram, YouTube, all the things. You can book a consultation, study with her. She's just amazing. And again, she was kind enough to give me a special consultation just for this reading to go over some health stuff, because she does have that health background. And I just did I recorded a podcast episode with her about medical astrology, which I will be releasing in the next this week, or officially I'll put I'm going to be putting on YouTube this week. So with that, I am CV.
I was going to say, not only does Vivi have a Patreon, and so do I. So if you wanted to study astrology, we both have our own schools of thought and ways of doing it. You can definitely explore that. Mine is Modern School of Ancient Wisdom.com, or look it up on Patreon and we can interact there. We do traditional source book club. And so it involves folk magic, intuitive ship and medium, and astrology all in one. CV, how can we reach you on your Patreon?
Yeah, I am basically right now Art of the Zodiac in all of the places. I'm about to redo the Patreon to add some stuff, but I'm Art of the Zodiac, and my podcast is Talk, where essentially I interview astrologers, magic practitioners, mages. Every time I say magician, I know someone's going to hit me like magic, like rabbit out of the hat. I can't say that word. Mages, artists, the radical active conversation. So I'm Art of the Zodiac in all the places. You are, say it again, because you have some new brand.
Yeah, I've changed my thing to Magic Sprechen, Spreken, because that's how it would be spelled in Middle High German, which is where my heritage comes from, through the Brauerei magic that I practice.
Amazing. And then Modern School of Ancient Wisdom. That's your
Modern School of Ancient Wisdom. Yep.
Fantastic. And we are Ask Us Astros, Ask Me Astros. You can ask us Astros at askmeastros.com. There is a website. So submit your questions anytime. That's the beautiful part. There is no deadline. You could just go on there right now and ask us a question, and we will either answer it here, or we will try to get to it with our IG lives we do every Monday.
Absolutely.
I think we've covered it all.
Yeah, this was a really great conversation pre-Mercury retrograde. I felt like this was, I feel very grounded in the way that we discussed. I also like your radical active conversation line. That should be on a t-shirt or some kind of something. It was good.
Thank you. Can we ask final question? How did you hurt your hand?
I was weightlifting. I was weightlifting and I hadn't been flexing my hands and taking care of them as I had been on a previous routine. And so as I went back, my hand got a little tweaked. And I also think the way I was holding a phone using an old case was straining my pinky. So I got a new everything, and I'm giving it the opportunity to heal. I'm acknowledging it by putting the glove on. So
it's worth noting that when we got on this call today, I immediately complimented KristaLyn on their great arm accessory, having no clue that it was medical.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. It's my magic glove for my left hand. Left
Yay!
hand?
Yeah. Okay, this has been beautiful. I'm gonna end this recording and we could say goodbye to each other. And goodbye, friends.
Goodbye.
If I can do this.